Welcome, everybody, today to our Leadership Executive Edge. We are so pleased to have with us Damon Diamora. He has been part of C-Suite for many years, and we truly appreciate his support and everything that he has provided and given back to the community. He's a truly exceptional executive and has spoken to C-Suite before, and I think that you'll get a lot out of today's session. And as you know, C-Suite is all about fostering executive relationships and wanting women and men executives to work across industry, brand acceleration, and expand their career paths. And we do have an executive search arm. So if any of your companies are hiring, please let us know. We'd be happy to help you or your company with that. And we can't do the programming without our sponsors. So we appreciate them very much. And also our philanthropic partners, Red Rover, Maryvale, and Bloom Again. They do tremendous things for the community. So please reach out to them as well and connect. And with that today, like I said, we're very blessed to have Damon with us. He has served as an executive mentor for C-suite executives and venture and PE-backed executives for the past 20 years. More than half of his women are clients in the C-suite. His programs focus on psychological performance, storytelling to drive stakeholder engagement, crisis leadership, and successful application of entrepreneurial principles to corporate environments. Thank you very much, Damon, for being with us today, and I will turn the program over to you.
Hey, thank you. So many friendly faces. Hey, everybody. Thanks for taking time out today. Always have fun with the group. So today they asked me to speak about crisis communications in and out of crisis. And I have a thesis that is basically the foundation for the work I've been doing the last 5 years, that once 2020 hit with a number of different crises, a number of smaller aftershocks have been almost borderline to full-blown crises. And the leaders that I've been working with over the last 5 years are constantly working in a crisis mindset, but learning to do it without like emotional scarcity and with some sort of comfort level. So today I wanted to talk about, at a really high level, determining the difference between speaking in crisis or mitigating a crisis. How do you define your stakeholders' needs, which I think is the most important part of any sort of communications plan, and how I go about doing that. And then a story structure that I developed for this call that's only 6 points of narrative, but it can get blown out and really detailed. And the maps that I do for corporate communications, there could be 50, 70 data points on a story map. Sorry, my puppet's hearing me talk and he needs to go down. Oh gosh. Here's my voice. So yeah, let's just get into it. I mean, I saw Darlene did a great thing about her take on storytelling, and I saw those notes. So whatever I present today, feel free to take or leave whatever you like, sprinkle it on top of how you do your storytelling for stakeholders or ignore it. But hopefully there'll be something a little bit different from a different perspective that I can present to you than you normally see. Let's see how I can. Oh, I need to request.
You need to share.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have the PowerPoint. Yeah.
Up we go. Okay.
Let's see here. Okay. Let me know when everybody can see it.
I can see it.
Wonderful. Put this in that little presentation mode so you don't have to see my notes. Oop. How did I do that? Can you see the whole screen or just the slide?
I see both.
So
Yeah, I see both.
How do
We
I?
had that the other day too, and I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, it's so strange. How about that?
That's good. That's perfect right there.
Sorry, 5 years and still learning Zoom. Okay. Okay, so why a focus on crisis comms? And I put links throughout the presentation to articles I've written on these subjects if you want to take a look. They're on LinkedIn and also on my Substack. My big thesis about 2020 for a number of reasons is that it created, first time in generations, a crisis that was full blown for everyone at the same time, hit a low point in their own personal and professional storylines. And personal, professional risks, et cetera, And since then, it started off with supply chain and logistics, and then talent acquisition and maybe talent retention. And now we're in, geopolitical risk and risk of wars and regulatory political risk. Last year, a lot of business was just put on hold because of election risk. So since 2020, there's been two types of leaders that I've seen emerge, and one of them has actually continued to thrive, and the others are kind of getting dragged along. You have to proactively take control to build a new foundation of getting uncomfortable, being uncomfortable. And a lot of people talk about resilience and grit, but for executives, it means identifying those holes that you were able to survive with anyway when you went through your last crisis and really actively working on those skills. Like I said, adopting a crisis mindset without that emotional scarcity, being able to see the world as a risky place but knowing that you're going to be okay because you're taking the steps and have done the work in order to mitigate whatever you can, and being able to let go of what you can't, which is also the skill set. They've all evolved their communication strategy, and I'll talk about this in more detail about types of narrative structures. But they've all proactively gained a deeper understanding of their stakeholders' needs. Even people that I knew that had customers for decades that thought that they would never go away or they knew what they needed, they really weren't talking to them on a regular basis. And now that's a part of all their scenario planning. And those are the groups of people that have continued to survive through all these small ripple waves since 2020. Um, Clarity and consistency is the big thing that you want to always be able to project. I love this quote by Shane because one of the few things you can control in a crisis is your narrative. I've seen major brands, completely lose control of their narrative for different things going on in the environment. It's much easier now in social media to lose control of your narrative to individuals or specific people in the media versus just a whole campaign. And the way that you avoid that or be able to mitigate it is to define both your internal and your stakeholders' needs and make sure that you're constantly serving, at least at a minimum level, a foundation to everyone that is being served some basic need. Ensuring that everybody on your behalf is telling a clear and consistent story, and that could be your team members, your employees, your sales reps, your investors talking to other people, whoever that might be. And then most importantly, deciding on which narrative structure to use. There's two main ones that I'll talk about, but finding a communication narrative structure that is easy for you to work with and your people to memorize so that at any point when you talk to a stakeholder, you can see in your mind where they are on this journey that you're trying to walk them through as their mentor, for lack of a better word. Um, and then the second part of that is mindset for leaders. Thinking without the level of intensity and scarcity perspective of being in a crisis, getting comfortable, not having all the answers, and being able to project that to your team members and being comfortable saying that you don't have all the answers in an ambiguous environment. Um, and being able to be confident in the decisions you're making because you know you've done all the work you can to mitigate everything around you that could go wrong. And how are those things communicated to the stakeholders that matter most? Some of them have different communication channels they like or prefer to be spoken to. Some of them have different means or modes. Some are mass communication, some are one-on-one, some are media appearances. But always being able to have a clear and consistent message so that when your stakeholders are talking on your behalf, they're actually amplifying your message, and it makes your communication strategy a lot more agile and efficient. Because if you have a direct line to your stakeholders where they know you're going to say something important when you're talking through that channel, they're going to listen and they're going to be able to shift and pivot as you need. Um, Narrative structure, I believe this for a long time. We're in a landscape of relevance, not facts. Almost anything can be said in the media now, and by the time it's fact checked, it's already implanted in people's minds, and they're not moving from it. So the three things that I always tell people when I'm working with clients are know your stakeholders 2.0 version of themselves, and you'll see this in the map. But the way I like to think in terms of stakeholders and leaders, bringing them along on their journey and kind of shepherding them, is that everybody right now, you, me, your clients, whoever, your investors, they're living in some 1.0 version of themselves walking around the world. And in their heads, they have an idea of what they could be if they had all the resources and knowledge that could help them. But your job is to bring them past that to this full new evolved 2.0 version of themselves so that their whole worldview changes. And it's really difficult for them to imagine solving their problems, satisfying their needs, their customer needs without you. Like a world without you is terrifying to them. You got to be able to tell a more truthful and a better story, and don't be afraid of telling the truth, even when you don't have the answers. And I spoke about this in a past workshop, and I wrote an article on it recently, but the rise of the feminine narrative in business communications, and just from a really high level, talking about like hero's journey. Traditional narrative is an external, for lack of a better word, masculine journey where a hero goes out into the world and slays some dragon or resistance and brings back treasure to all of their stakeholders to make their lives better. But the heroine's journey in the traditional feminine narrative and everything from literature through business communications has been overcoming that internal resistance. So in Crisis, the common theme is that everyone is having an internal crisis with their internal resistance. They're doubting themselves, they're unsure of their futures, they're unsure if they are being taken seriously. Imposter syndrome starts to creep in. So there's been this amazing weaving of masculine and feminine narrative from both men and women because we all experience different parts of these journeys. But the best leaders in the world who have been able to gain advocacy from these stakeholders and kind of have them trust them through these crises have been able to weave both of these. And I'll go over at a high level what that means. Um, so when you're communicating to stakeholders, either in or out of crisis, there are primary goals for them and primary goals for you and your team. The goal for your stakeholders, whether they're internal or external, is to be proactively engaged with you, either as their thought leader, their authority, their brand, their vendor, whoever it might be, and to have confidence that no matter what's going on in the outside world coming across their news feeds or people are whispering in their ears, that they are confident in your company and in your leadership, and that you are protecting their interests and serving their needs as things are in constant motion and things are evolving and new challenges are popping up. And they really do want to be an advocate for you, and they want to go out and they want to take action on your behalf, whether that means being your customer, being, a sounding board or amplifying your message. And that means forward momentum when they're thinking about a crisis pending or actually in one. They want to know how they get from here forward, even one step, baby steps, compounding that positivity. And they actually want to be led and directed in these times of ambiguity. A lot of people just crave someone that looks or sounds like an authority to tell them things are going to be okay if they do X, Y, Z. And it's a little bit Machiavellian, but you can get away with a lot only having a little information if you project confidence in what it is that you're saying to these stakeholders. And your goals and your executive team's goals should be number one, emotional relief, being able to calm down and see things from a pragmatic perspective. I wrote an article about pragmatic optimism, how you can be an optimist and hopeful and look at the world, but it has to be through a real filter of reality. So you can do that once you have some emotional relief and realize your company's not going under, your employees aren't going away, you're not going to lose your house, whatever it might be. Um, and having these stakeholders on board allows you to have clarity in that decision making under really ambiguous conditions, but also the confidence in the decisions made and communicated to them is that I'm giving them the right information and telling them the right thing to do. So once you kind of scale down that panic mode in crisis and you can make these decisions from somewhat of a clear state of mind, the confidence in those decisions starts to amplify through not just yourself, your team sees that you're confident, your customers see that you're confident. And it also helps a lot with recruiting team and/or investors or even retaining them in crisis. A lot of people who were your allies start to pop up and see their own interests being threatened and say, am I really with the right person on board to help me with this? And your job is to convince them that the answer is yes. Um, so two filters for how you're going to tell these stories to your stakeholders. The first one is out of crisis, and the other one's in crisis. When you're out of crisis, it's all about relationship and trust building. Have as much engagement and dialogue as you can. Learn to schedule routine stakeholder interviews, even if they're casual, but start to build some database of what they are telling you along the way. And some of it might be reading tea leaves. Some of it might just be checking in and seeing what their general general energy is towards you, the business environment, et cetera. But a lot of people wait until things are kind of dark clouds on the horizon to check in with the people that matter the most, and don't do that. Encourage feedback and questions. Have encourage two-way conversations versus when you're in crisis, it's going to be more of a one-way. I'm telling, not asking, in a polite way. But have a positive, engaging tone. Be optimistic about the future. Celebrate those successes, and this also translates into internally with your team onto that team happiness and retention. I had a client who, was scoring very low in their like HR assessments of their leadership as a team leader. And it turned out that whenever they had a win as a department, they would just celebrate the win as a department. They wouldn't call out all these individuals who contributed, whatever it might be. And being able to celebrate those people totally flipped all those engagement numbers, and people felt heard and appreciated. And it goes a long way because if they can feel heard and appreciated when things are good, they're gonna give you a little bit more leeway when things are bad. And the smallest amount of leeway or advocacy could mean the difference between holding on to somebody, whether it's a customer, a stakeholder, a team member, or losing them when the clouds start to set in. Honing your storytelling skills and templates, really taking time to work on this and taking time to work on scenario planning. I know everybody's busy, but even if it's once a quarter, taking a half a day and getting everybody in a room with no phones and a whiteboard and saying, what's possible on the horizon, and what should we be preparing for, and actually learning to have a variety of communication styles and channels to talk with these people through. Some of them are social media, some of them are direct, some of them are, through proper media channels and press releases or interviews, whatever. But really getting comfortable with as many communication channels as you can, because when a crisis hits, you never know where the bulk of these stakeholders are going to go focus on one versus the other. And it happens like that, and people that feel some sort of security blanket in a crisis, even if it's not the best communication channel, that's where they're going to be. And you want to make sure you have a presence on there that is very clear with your consistent messaging so that they can contact you. Now, in an environment, this is one of the things, great quote by David Fincher, a filmmaker. They asked him on his first feature film how he got to direct how he wrangled like 300 crew members on this big movie. And he said most people are basically sheep. Like if you have the majority of a plan and talk with authority, most people are just desperate to follow you into the darkness because they want somebody to hold their hand. And I've seen this happen over and over in business. So in crisis, you want to exude that confidence and exert authority. I've talked to people that are uncomfortable with the term authority. They think it has some other, meaning, but you have to be a leader in times of crisis. And your brand has to be that one beacon, or your company, whatever your value prop is that one thing that's still shining in the darkness, that North Star that they can see. Be transparent and be honest. I interviewed the former CEO of Arby's, which is a big, QSR restaurant chain. And during the pandemic, when it was 2 weeks to shut down, and then it was a longer shutdown, and nobody could go to a restaurant even with a mask, he got on a Zoom with basically like 20,000 employees and people that worked at all these franchises. And he said, we have no idea how long this is going to last. We're not getting any information. We'll do everything we can to keep everybody on payroll, but we're just in the dark as you are. And his board found out about the call and called him and yelled at him and was like, what are you doing? You can't tell people, you don't know what's going on. And he was like, they're all living their lives in the same state of panic and without any information, just like we are. And they need to know that we understand that. And then when I interviewed him in 2023, 3 years after the COVID shutdowns, he said whether it was McDonald's, Subway, Burger King, Taco Bell, he had the highest percentage of employees that were with him during COVID that stayed, because even at the lowest levels, they don't want to be bullshit, like they want to know that, okay, we're all in a big cloud right now and we're trying to help you. So be transparent, always be honest. The penalty for not being honest is always worse, whatever it is, when it finally comes out. Use an empathetic tone. You can still be optimistic, but try to make them understand that, you are also, your team members, you are in this lower place having a lot of internal resistance and internal questions. And that's where the feminine internal narrative devices I'll talk about in the communications. Be proactive. Don't wait for them to ask questions. Update stakeholders regularly, even if they don't want to hear it, or even if they feel like it might be bombarding, use multiple communication channels and always focus on actions, not environments. Always focus on this is what needs to be done, and we're doing this in the best interest, even though it might hurt, versus trying to make everybody comfortable before you kind of lay some heavy news on them. And I talked to multiple leaders in different industries that had the Arby's example. And a lot of people just appreciated being told, yeah, like we're all hurting and we have no idea when it's going to end. um, and most importantly, taking control of this narrative, extending your focus not just to your customers or your employees or your investors or the media or market in general, but to secondary and tertiary stakeholders. Who do your stakeholders have to calm and satisfy needs for? Like, why are they using your product or why are they using you? Do they have families, companies, other customers? Are you part of a chain of vendor solutions? And the way to preemptively kind of calm everybody down is finding common data points across all those stakeholder groups to use as a foundation to like stop the bleed and have a triage strategy. So even though internal, external stakeholders have different needs, they all have some common needs. And if you can look like you're satisfying those from day one, they'll give you a little bit more time to get to their individual needs. And that will give you time to figure out individual comm strategies for them. Regain control of your narrative, it's lost. I saw brands in 2020 lose complete control of their narrative, especially not just during COVID, but during all the social unrest. And these are brands that used to just be able to 10 years ago pay $20 million for a Super Bowl ad and let people know exactly what they should think about their brand. And in a matter of days, they lost complete control of their narrative to their employees, to the press. So regain control immediately as you can and maintain it if you're fortunate enough to have retained it. Some people are fortunate in those instances, but figuring out who your stakeholders are and talking to them regularly helps you understand these secondary relationships. And the more you can prove that your value solution, whoever you are, whatever you do, isn't just serving them, but helping them serve their stakeholders, even a little bit, you become more valuable than the second best option to them in a crisis. Um, so these are the 4 quick slides about how I define stakeholders. And all of these exercises, if you're taking notes, and I'll make this available if you want it, you should filter all these prompts through based on, am I in a crisis or am I out of crisis and I'm trying to mitigate what might be on the horizon. Define them as internal or external, and that's usually pretty easy to do. Primary stakeholders, they're people that are directly affected in a positive or negative way by the decisions you're making. Internally, these could have been keeping people on staff versus furloughs. Externally, could have been this product's still going to be available to you regularly every Tuesday, like you're seeing it on your shelf, whoever that might be. Secondary stakeholders, they're indirectly affected in a positive or negative way, and sometimes they're directly affected by your stakeholders' ability to access your value proposition or whatever you've been serving them to serve their needs. And literally, what do they stand to gain or lose by listening to you, sticking with you, taking your advice, allowing you to be their mentor and their shepherd through this story and through this crisis? What do they get if you succeed? What happens if you fail? How do you quantify it? Is it making or losing time, resources, money, revenue? And how is their gain or loss expressed and manifested? Are they shutting down business divisions because they can't access certain lines in your product line? Which I saw that happen. I saw some people with even food companies, certain ingredients they couldn't get into the country, and they had to alter what they were offering to their vendors. So very specifically, if you win, what are they getting? If you fail, how's it affecting them? And is it quantified in dollars, time, or labor? And what do they expect of you? How much time do they expect you to be able to give to them one-on-one or allocate to their problem when you have 100 fires to put out? How much does this stakeholder, whether it's an investor, a big one or a small one, or whoever, expect you to dedicate to their problems? What do they expect you to give them resource wise? Is there somebody dedicated on your team that is like their dedicated salesperson or liaison, et cetera? Do they expect time from you when normally they're used to working with team members, but now that they're in crisis, they want that security blanket of talking to the number one person who's the face of the brand? And what are the channels via which you are going to deliver that to them? Do they want to see you on Zoom? Do they want an email update, et cetera? And what do you expect of them in the same sentence? Um, you have to be really, really upfront with people as to this is a relationship and it's transactional. It could be warm and fuzzy because it's business and we like each other, but it's still transactional. And I used to have this struggle when I had advisors for my venture fund who were really, really successful people in the business world. And I would say, okay, you want a little piece of equity, you want to be an advisor, you're going to have to give me 1 hour a month on a phone call or a Zoom. I'm going to expect these amounts of introductions from you to other investors, channel partners, whoever it might be. And some people are uncomfortable with that. But it's like, you have to be upfront about what you expect from this relationship because even in a go-giver mentality, one of my favorite warm, fuzzy business books, and the idea is you always give more than you get because you build up that karma bank. There's still a get in every relationship in business, and it is transactional. So very, very clear, and sometimes in crisis, exceedingly blunt. I expect this to be here on this date. And then the fourth part is what are their priorities? And a lot of them have multiple priorities, but they have to be ranked. You know, is it the cost of your product? Is it the performance? Is it the quality? Is it how and when it's available? Because other stuff is caught up in the ports or right now with this whole tariff debacle, you know. And really, really importantly, what are the rules for them to engage with you? What has to happen for them to pick up the phone and want to engage with you one-on-one to address these concerns? So kind of have an idea of milestones of if this happens, this domino falls, what's the next one to fall? And at what domino stage is not that salesperson, but that CEO going to call me and expect one-on-one treatment? And are they friendly or hostile? And some people go back and forth from being friendly to hostile or reverse. This happens a lot with board members, depending on the situation and what you're asking for and what you want versus what their vision for is the company strategy. And I've seen people go from friendly to hostile. And there's also this middle ground of ambiguity where they're not sure if they could trust somebody. So a lot of times in these stakeholder needs definitions, we're building out kind of avatars for these people. And there's friendlies, there's hostiles, and there's this middle group of kind of question marks over them. And they all have, even for the same information, you might want to communicate it differently in order to satisfy those folks. And then the journeys they go on, this is the narrative part of what I was talking about. There's basically 6 story points, which I broke down at a high level. Today, how you and I and your stakeholders exist as this 1.0 version, this idea they have in their head of if all their problems were solved, I would exist up here. But that's really only a 1.5 version. It's only like half of a level up because they don't even know what's possible. They know what they know, but they don't know what you know. What are the challenges and obstacles to success once they commit to having you be their guide on this journey and kind of walk them through this crisis or be their mentor? What are the possible challenges that they're going to experience to success? They at some point have to access your value proposition, your unique treasure, the one thing that can serve their needs above everybody else, and then define their 2.0 version of themselves. Like this is the world that they operate in now as a customer, as a vendor, as an employee, because the world has changed and I understand the rules of the new world. And this person, our leader, has been our shepherd, and I trust them completely and have confidence in their decision going forward for the next crisis or however we're going to exist. And then how are they going to go share this news with their stakeholders and say, I'm better off in all these ways than I was before I met Beth, Diane, who had Nike, whoever. And now I can go to my stakeholders and share some of that treasure because it's going to help me gain advocacy and engagement through them. And this is just a really basic visualization of that. The steps are on the sides, and it looks a little bit complex, but I'll walk you through. We always start on the left side. So the bottom left is how they exist now, and you think of it almost as kind of like ramping up to the top of a roller coaster in the beginning of a roller coaster. You're taking them on this journey, and they're agreeing to trust you in this crisis to be able to serve their needs and protect their interests on the way to hopefully what they think is that 1.5 version of themselves. But the moment that they embark on it, this happens with entrepreneurs, with people in new corporate jobs. there's this thing that Kurt Vonnegut used to call the trap door, which is, you step out into your new office, your new world as an entrepreneur, as a founder, and there's all these unknowns that you weren't ready for, all these challenges and obstacles that you didn't even plan for. So you start on the first dip in this roller coaster ride, and you start experiencing challenges and obstacles. You start realizing who's an enemy and who's an ally on your side, personally and professionally, and identifying these challenges as internal or external. And over time, timelines could be collapsed or extended, but eventually, most people and your customers, your stakeholders, your board, your investors situation dealing in these same crises, they're going to reach a point where they are so frustrated and feel like other people are not having the resources to help them that they abandon the journey. I've seen, investors really heavily invested in some of these startup companies just abandon them overnight when ChatGPT released some new update and it took away their AI advantage, and they already had 2,000 Salesforce customers or whatever. So the point where most people abandon the journey, that is your job to communicate versus those ways that I was talking about before. What is your unique value, your unique treasure, et cetera, what we call it, and how is that going to help them get out of this rut, get out of this dark cave, and actually become an empowered version of themselves? And that's a whole journey that you take them on. But ultimately, for your stakeholders and their stakeholders, how are they going to exist in the new world? Do they have new tools, resources? Are they more efficient? Are they making more money? Are there new defenses against future crises that your unique value is helping them put up walls to defend? How does their whole worldview transform, which is really, really important? They need to see the world before and after, X person, X company helped them in their time of need. And they need to see it as a very, very specific black and white. There's two different worlds that I existed in, and I'm never going back to that other one because now I found, my treasure supplied by this person or this brand. They experience emotional relief and they're able to convey that to their stakeholders, and confidence is restored along the whole chain. And that is when you slip back to the out of crisis stakeholder interviews and you start looking for those clouds on the horizon, because now when you have their confidence that you've walked somebody successfully through this journey, they're going to trust you the next time that the clouds come. Um, and just a little word about the feminine narrative. People that do storytelling or know a lot about this, it's a very complex. It has a lot more to do than just men and women, but it's been happening for the last 5 or 6 years. And you look at corporate communications from everybody from Jamie Dimon all the way up to politicians, and the difference between the external hero's journey and this internal feminine overcoming resistance journey is specifically that they master the women traditionally in storytelling structure. I'm not saying women in general, master their world by understanding it, not by dominating it or controlling the people in it. So having those higher degrees of empathy and being able to communicate that, they find out about the world by being and experiencing it as that person in the world, not by doing that sacred task. Both men and women go on these journeys in different ways to varying degrees. Before 2020, the inner journey received a lot less recognition and less applause from the world of both people's dependents and brands dependents and stakeholders. But the people who have been most successful, especially in 2020 and beyond, have been the ones that are able to blend these two structures and making your stakeholders understand it's transactional. There's something that you're engaged with me to get money, time, better health, happiness, fulfillment, whatever it might be. There's a transaction to that external journey where I need to provide you that traditionally masculine journey treasure. But we also realize, because we're all going through what you're going through right now, that there's an internal resistance, and there's a whole lot of things that go into identity, confidence levels, etc. And being able to communicate and weave both of those into a narrative where they feel they're going to get what they need to satisfy their needs transactionally, but also feel good about it at the end of the transaction. That is the golden pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Not just giving them what they need and having them be satisfied and survive through it with you, but feeling good about it and actually, having a higher level of confidence and engagement with you than they did before this crisis. So really high level takeaways. Another article on Substack about the power of storytelling in business and kind of how these arcs work. little more detailed. Make the time for regular scenario planning and really scenario plan. And some people don't understand what that means. They think it's just about looking at the world and saying what could go wrong. So you might need to hire somebody who's a scenario planner or a crisis expert, but really figure out how to look at your world through a lens that if you were putting on a new pair of sunglasses and they made everything a little bit more transparent, figure out how to do that. In versus out of crisis, focus on those stakeholder needs based on identifying the filters that we talked about. Sometimes you might need to develop your own metrics for the data in your situation to communicate. I worked with a client who didn't who the metrics for their industry weren't portraying actively or accurately what was happening when the whole industry was in crisis. So they sat down with a team of analytics and data people. They developed their own metrics, proved it out, and now they have kind of a new standard for the industry that everybody looks at their brand to. But focus on the internal narrative more because stakeholders are not just focused on metrics; they're focused on their own survival. And the moment that a crisis is on the horizon, please, if you take nothing else away from this, these people, your stakeholders, are already in what Tony Blauer calls a fear loop. And they start directing this movie in their head of the worst case outcomes. And then they start acting as if they are inevitable. Before any of them happen, they've gone 10 horrible situations down the road in their mind. And the more you let them live in this fear loop without stopping that movie and creating a new movie for them with the narratives that you're portraying to them, it's going to be harder and harder to reel them back from the edge of the abyss. And I give an example of this. I talked to somebody when furloughs were happening in 2020, and I said, "Okay, so you heard a rumor that your company might start furloughing people next month," and they said, "Oh my God, like how am I going to pay my mortgage? I'm going to lose my house. My wife's going to leave me because I'm going to be broke. My kids are going to have to leave private school and go into public school. They're going to have worse jobs, worse lives, probably have lower." Like they went into this spiral of like 20 years in the future because furloughs might happen. And it's the job of that leader to stop that and talk about facts and talk about the idea that we are ready to mitigate whatever is coming. So that's it. Hopefully, this has been somewhat informative, and you can take some of these ideas and sprinkle them into your own comm strategy or how you do scenario planning or talk to stakeholders. But yeah, hopefully this is interesting and helps a little bit.
This
You're
meeting.
on mute, Beth. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Damon. I'm going to stop the recording so we can ask our questions.
Oh,
And I
sure.
think